How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. It's a beautiful day here in Philadelphia. I'm sure it's nice in Reading as well. It's the second day of March Madness. So there's a lot going on today in the basketball world, and it feels like the Sixers and the NBA is kind of secondary for this weekend and probably the rest of this month. But me and Sean are back today to talk a little Sixers action for you. Sean, how you doing today, brother?
Yes, sir. It's the best basketball time in the year. So
Yeah.
Christmas season out here, the way games are popping off. So I love the tournament. Been watching heavy. Always good to just my favorite time of year for basketball in general. So very cool, but still got to get through the Sixers grind.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get too far, we want to talk about March Madness. We want to talk about your favorite place to bet.
Yeah.
Talk about Bet US, leading sportsbook and casino in the country right now. We're super excited to be a part of them growing. They just added player props, which we're super happy about. You guys know Pick Swap Parlay, which we're gonna got to start doing those again. But
Yeah.
right now, I've been losing my money on all the NCAA tournament stuff. So if you're looking to lose your money like me, go sign up and use our code PICKSWAP and sign up to get your first bet risk free up to $500. That's our code PICKSWAP at login. I had a terrible day yesterday. Kentucky ruined my entire thing. I'm just
Damn.
miserable, just miserable. I had all these upsets. I had all the upsets going. I had Richmond. All I needed was Kentucky to win.
Damn.
And Kentucky of all the teams that I had in this parlay, minus 4,000
Yeah. In
to start
overtime too. In
in
overtime.
OT to St. Peter. I've never even heard of St. Peter's, but regardless, so the Sixers got back on track with a W. Not a pretty one. Definitely one. They made us sweat it out a little bit there against Cleveland. So what did you see from that game? How you feeling after they get a little comeback win against the Cavs?
Yeah, overall, I don't think I was upset about it as I think a lot of people. I mean, the Cavs are a fairly legitimate team on the road. Obviously, a tough stretch of games that they've been on in their schedule. I didn't expect Embiid to play. I was surprised he suited up. I thought that was going to be a rest game, especially after coming down on the back injury in the previous game, which was a scary fall there. So I thought that was going to be one of the rest days. We've heard so much about the planned rest for Joel and James Harden, but either one of them has yet to take a game off since Doc has said all that. So I think I hope is coming up and there's a plan for that. I mean, the biggest story of the Cavs game specifically was just the four-headed monster of Embiid, Harden, Maxey, and Tobias. That was pretty much the whole Sixers team. They combined for 100 points. So the bench and Matisse in total combined for 18 other. That's a big positive and negative when you look at it because it's great that
Yeah.
those guys are playing well. They all were fairly efficient, all had pretty good nights. Embiid 13 of 19 from the field, Harden 5 of 12, Maxey 9 of 15, Toby 8 of 13, and 3 of 6 from 3, which I love. But
Yeah.
also there just has to be more bench help. Like the Sixers are not going to escape this playoff run without getting some contribution. And Georges Niang, who has been the only real impact player off the bench, 1 for 6, 1 of 4 from 3. This is after the 2 of 12 night that ended so brutally in that one. So they just got to find a way to get something out of this bench unit.
Yeah. So there's just been this weird kind of paradox. I've seen a lot of different opinions on Twitter recently. Some people are, obviously the bench is the weakness of this team, and it became a weakness very quickly because it wasn't that way. We were talking about how deep this team was earlier in the season, and I don't know if we need to beat the dead horse even more than we have in recent pods, but I mean, Deandre Jordan, man, is just not playable. He's
Yeah.
just not a playable big, and I really cannot fathom looking at that and saying he's the guy that we'd rather play over, any of the other guys
Yeah.
that, the other three options at backup center that you have. I can't believe that DeAndre Jordan is the guy that you picked. But like Shake has made 2 shots over his last 70 minutes of play. Furkan is not even cracking the rotation anymore. Isaiah Joe gets tossed in for 5 minutes. Danny Green, I don't know what he was doing the other night. Just passing up too many, just passing up shots and then taking floaters or mid-range pull-up jumpers. It's like,
Yeah.
if you're not shooting the 3, kick it because nobody wants you to shoot that shot. George, the thing is with him right now is he's basically playing as a
The guy.
hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of doing both. He's playing as a really important piece of the bench unit, but he's also playing, a lot of minutes with the starters in that unit. And a lot of people are saying the bench isn't getting enough minutes, or these bench players aren't playing. Literally, I saw an article, and I don't remember who it was. I have an idea of who it is, but I don't want to say the wrong name. But
Mhm.
they were saying that the bench isn't playing enough together. And I was like,
What we
that's been
don't
our
want.
whole thing this whole
Yeah.
time. It's like we don't want them to play together. Like the whole point is to mix them in. And I think the staggering of the rotation has kind of changed the way that it's been a little bit of a shakeup recently, and that's understandable for there to be struggles. But the Sixers bench just doesn't have it like a I don't even know a playmaker, but like just a guy that can get a bucket or that can dominate the ball, and so I don't know. Where do you think they go from here? Like, do you think they make a change at like some degree of change?
There's not a lot they can do. Like I've heard,
Yeah,
like the deadline's passed. We can't sign. There's no buyout market or anything. You're pretty much grasping at straws if you're reaching for like an impact player at this point. For the most part, this is kind of the evil we have to deal with. Specifically talking about DeAndre Jordan, I do think that is like the biggest glaring weakness, and it's even more frustrating when like watching like the highlights from the G League and Bassie playing so well specifically, and it's like the guy could be that like, and now granted, like we're not there at practice. We don't see what happens behind the scenes. Maybe he is not with it, but at the same time, it's like, let's try. Like this is where we're at this point of the season, is trying to figure it out. At least give him a shot, give him a run out there. And I've been since the Harden addition, since the Harden trade, specifically talking about how Bassie is just like a perfect fit as far as what he does, and for this box to still remain unchecked for like if it's even a functional duo is pretty crazy to me. And it's especially crazy because it's to me evident at this point that DeAndre Jordan is not. He just simply does not have the legs left to be the guy. Like for a guy that is the all-time leader in field goal percentage, he's shooting 40% from the field, which is difficult to do. Now, granted, it's only 5 games, but the guy doesn't shoot from outside like a 4-foot window. So to be shooting like 40% from the field when all you're doing is attempting lobs and lay-ins is not a good look whatsoever. And I mean, I do see some like Amir Johnson-esque numbers coming in the playoffs if DeAndre Jordan's the guy. And from all looks for what Doc says, it seems like that's going to be the case. And when talking about it as a unit, just looking at like this 5-man, there were 10 guys that were active in that Cavs game. So 5 more, like you said, Furkan's pretty much out of the rotation at this point. That's Danny Green, Georges Niang, DeAndre Jordan, Shake Milton, and Isaiah Joe. And Shake played 3 minutes. Isaiah Joe played 4 minutes. But that 5-man rotation, like that's not winning anything. That's not winning any minutes. Like you have to stagger these, keep impact guys in. I don't know what you do unit wise. It's definitely a major concern. And another guy like I would love to just like take a chance on is Charlie Brown Jr. again. Like I get another guy that has limitations and stuff, but it's like that's at least another aspect. Like Doc
an
just needs to
athlete.
get an athlete. Like let's just get a little more creative and try some things. I think my personal read on it at this point is like, all right, this is not quite working. Let's try and do something different with the 14 games we have left before we head in these playoffs. And the Sixers have a lot of clicking that they still need to figure out and not a lot of time.
Yeah, and again, like you said, be creative. I think when you think back to the Rockets days and James Harden was starting games with PJ Tucker playing center, like there's ways that they can figure it out, and he's such a smart basketball player. Harden is that I think like I feel like you could genuinely roll Niang out of the 5, or you could even roll Thibault out of the 5 for
Yeah.
stretches of time to try to push pace, space the floor, make things difficult for the other team, and do something different. I just don't know that Doc has that creative ability anymore. Like we talked about it last week. I think the game has, it's past him, and the way that I see, you know, he's just so stubborn. I don't think he wants to do anything different. I think he's so locked into whatever he's done for however long is going
Yeah.
to be the way to do it. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you don't look at Charles Bassey with, his athletic ability, his rolling ability that he's proven in the NBA, not in the G League. In the short amount of time he's played in the NBA, we've seen fantastic stretches and really nice, uh, you know, instincts as a roller. And then his vertical ability, getting up, being defensively, like DeAndre Jordan, he can't play defense. He literally like cannot play defense. And he had a block the other night. It's like that's great. But a block doesn't make up for the other 75% of things that he's a step behind on
Yeah.
from a defensive like it's just so bad watching him play you know most teams in the NBA switch.
Yeah.
Most teams do. The Sixers don't normally, mostly because they have Embiid as an anchor. But like even Doc mentioned it at the beginning when James Harden first got traded here, he was like, James likes to switch. Um, we don't really switch here. But when DeAndre Jordan's on the court, you literally can't. And then you're just asking for, rolls. You're asking for lobs. You're asking for guys getting, downhill onto DeAndre Jordan as a 2-on-1. Like it's just going to that type of defensive like his capability just leads to bad things happening. Even if
Mhm.
it's not a direct score on him, it's a collapse, a kick, a shot. It's just very bad. And there's times where the Sixers defense just looks terrible without Embiid on the floor, and that's just that was kind of their bread and butter before, and it's really it's disappointing to see it go the opposite way at times.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, schematically looking at like what they're doing defensively is they're gonna get murdered in the postseason, which with the amount of just drop coverage they run and just the like it's so structured in what they do defensively, which I understand is like you obviously need to have your identity, but like teams know they're just walking into mid-range jumpers or open three-pointers if they do the pick and roll with Embiid, right? And I understand like you want Embiid as the anchor, the guy around the basket, but in playoffs, like you just can't give teams those shots, which is pretty much what's happening, and it's being exploited on a pretty much nightly basis in Sixers game, and just like they get it to space, they run the two-man game and pick their best, like whoever it is. Like the Nets game, it was Curry and Durant that were walking into these constantly, and I mean pick your poison for whatever team it is and who's the guy doing it, but it's the same concept every time, just walking into that. And Embiid is going to have to step up and be able to guard on the perimeter in the postseason because we just have to. You were way better off in terms of odds. Like if this is Harden and Embiid specifically, your chances are better of Embiid on a guard on the perimeter and Harden banging in the post rather than just giving him the shot, which is kind of the result of what's happening right now. And that's once again like something I'm not seeing any urgency to change up right now.
Yeah, it doesn't matter till April. So we
Yeah.
got about 2 weeks until we need to start figuring some things out. I don't know, man. It's just I don't know. I'm trying not to be pessimistic because they have played well. They're what 7-2 in Harden's games since being here. They've won 7 out of their last 10. The three have really stuck out. I
Yeah.
think that's the problem is the three that they have lost.
As it always
Um,
does.
it just like makes your stomach turn. And then the two that they like the game against the Cavs, I know a lot of people had a problem with it. They could have played better. They were stupid. They made stupid mistakes. Like down the
And
stretch, they just make dumb mistakes.
yeah, real quick, the third quarter of that game, the Sixers scored 13
Yep.
points. They were outscored 31-13 in the third quarter, and this was a game. We talked a ton about this last pod, so I don't want to dive into it again. But it's just like we don't get 48 straight minutes of competing on the court. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen every night, and it's a lot of times at the beginning, like we see them coming out flat on a regular basis. This time it was right after halftime. Like they looked good at the start of that Cavs game. They came out strong. Excellent second quarter too. They had 72 points in the first half, which was like I'm pretty sure that was their season high or tied their
Yeah.
season high for that. And then to just drop 13 in the third and allow the Cavs to fully come back in that game. And it was even one of those, like, again, I never bet against the Sixers, but I was sitting there watching and be like looking at the live line at like +9.5, +10.5. And I'm just like, this 100% becomes a game again. Like, there's no way it's not. It's the same thing with this team every single time.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's frustrating that that can't be a part of this team's identity either, and it certainly has kind of become it already.
It's been the issue
Yeah.
for this team, and it's something that will literally haunt me to the day I die. Watch like that series last year has I think scarred all of us. Um, I mean, just that when you were talking about playing drop coverage,
Yeah.
my heart drops into my stomach. Watching Trae Young shoot wide open floaters or lobbing it to John Collins, like that's the kryptonite of this team right now. And they did have an elite perimeter defender at the time. And it's just I don't know, too many like reoccurring issues. I would like to. I think we're gonna have to have a serious conversation about the leadership, the coaching.
Mhm.
Uh,
I do wanna say, I think like, I do think Doc is coaching for his job in some regards this year. Like, I
in the
don't think he
playoffs,
has
yes.
in the playoffs 100%. I don't think he necessarily has, like, the free pass and the long leash that I think it kind of is perceived. It definitely seems like it's perceived by him to be the case, but, like, if this is another, like, second round exit or a disappointing playoff performance, I can't see how his job wouldn't be in jeopardy, which Doc should be aware of that.
I don't like. I think there's a way I look at it. I think if it's disappointing, like last
Yeah,
year was disappointing. I mean,
for sure.
obviously for a lot of reasons. It was more devastating than it was disappointing. But if you go out with like I don't know, I think back to the Raptors series, and as much as that sucked, like to the core, was like the worst thing ever. They played the eventual champions to 7 games and lost in the last second. Like
Mhm.
you can kind of look back at that and hang your hat on it. It was a good series. it didn't necessarily go the way you wanted it to. And could you have won? Probably. But it wasn't like the worst. You know what I mean? Like last year was like you had these expectations. You're a really good team. You have superstars, and you pissed your pants against a team that nobody even thought twice about going into the playoffs. This Eastern Conference is deep. There's a
Yeah.
lot of really good teams. Even down the stretch, I saw a Cleveland writer say that they want the Sixers in the playoffs, and I was laughing because genuinely I think the Sixers would kick their ass, because
Yeah.
they played not very well the other night and still beat them. I know they didn't have Jared Allen, and Jared Allen is good. Don't
Very
get
good.
me
Yeah.
wrong,
Mhm.
but I think the Sixers beat their ass genuinely if they play them in a series. But I'm not that confident against like the other 5 teams above them.
Yeah. No, I would say I think it's pretty likely that just about anybody they draw first round is going to be a tougher team than the Hawks were last season, which is pretty scary when you think about it like that. And especially when you talk about being devastating, the whole mindset last year was to get the 1 seed so we could coast right through to the conference finals. So we didn't have to play the Bucks and the Nets. We would just have to play the winner. And then to not even get to that point, to like, it's incredibly frustrating. And obviously, we're putting up too much negativity because
Yeah.
Sixers are still third in the East. We're still looking all right, but I mean, there are some major concerns that I think are showing face more than I expected them to.
Yeah, so let's turn the energy around. It's a
Yeah,
Friday.
flip
We're
it up,
feeling
flip it up.
good. We're gonna flip it up here. So one guy I want to talk about is Tobias Harris. I want to show a little bit of love. We've been very critical of him. I thought he played well again the other night. He's changed the way he's played. Like there's a fundamental change. You can see it in the way that he's approaching. There's still sometimes too many of the post ups. I catch myself out loud saying like, no, 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 no.
Me too.
Uh, because I know you see him, he drives in, it gets cut off, he turns his back, and I'm like, no, just pass it out. It'll come back, I promise. But catching and shooting from three, taking 6 3-pointers the other night, making three, attacking downhill. He made some decent plays. And defensively, again, it's the rebounding that bothers me
Yeah.
on the other end. I think that's something that just like he's just not that very like he's not very good at it. But what have you seen from Tobias as a positive from a positive standpoint? In his changing role, how is he adapted?
Yeah, I agree that it's been like a conscious change, like something he's really trying to fit in, which he deserves credit for that. Like it's not the
Yeah.
easiest thing to do. His role has drastically changed in this offense, and he's trying to find a way to make the pieces fit as best they can. The role he's being asked to play is not who he naturally is as a player, and he spoke pretty openly about that in his pressers, kind of talking about his fit and how everybody was so worried for like him knowing it would come. But I mean, if he can just do that job, it helps this team tremendously. And I guess there is an aspect of like asking him to do the simplistic version of his game and knowing that there's a little more in the bag or in the back that hopefully doesn't ever need to be busted out. But if there is that occasion for a Toby to go 1-on-1 or ISO, if he's really feeling himself with the bench unit or whatever, that's something to have. And I mean, as much as we brush aside like his importance, looking at like the lack of depth on this bench, like the scoring has to come from somewhere. And asking the top four guys to combine for 80 point or for 100 points on every game is a lot, but like that's kind of what needs to happen for this team. And maybe not to that extreme, but they all have to be producing for the Sixers offense to like run the right way. And Toby's still a vital part of that.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this is, and something I will give Doc credit for, is that he has been doing a better job of staggering.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you're thinking about it, the bench production, there's not a lot of bench points coming from them. And they just haven't shot well. Like it just seems like they haven't shot well. George obviously is a much better shooter than he's shown over the last like 3 games or so. Danny Green is a much better shooter than he's shown over the last couple games. It's the stuff that I think is going to change and start turning into the correct direction.
Mhm.
But like when you think about it, these guys aren't like one of Harden, Embiid, Maxey, and Harris are going to be on the floor essentially at all times. So naturally, those guys become the focal point of whatever offensive set is happening. So if Harris is on the floor and he's surrounded by 4 bench players, which like is the worst case scenario
Mhm.
from all the options, like I think it's in a vacuum. It looks really bad with the bench not being able to score. And it would be helpful if they could, hit some shots, especially George, obviously, because he is the biggest role out of all those guys, and DG.
Yeah.
Um, but like these guys, like you said, like Harris is going to be in there. He's sometimes going to be asked to be a little bit more of a focal point offensively when he's surrounded by the bench unit. So guys like, the rest of the guys aren't going to get as many opportunities. I wanted to ask you, because this is something that I've seen a lot and something that we talked about a lot this season. And Maxey played great the other night and, hit a huge shot,
Yeah.
which, before I even ask this, you saw the Harden and him after he hit that shot, they were like kind of talking
Yeah.
about something. And then, I mean, I made nothing of it. It seemed like he was telling him what to do, was telling him something, and then they dapped up and it was fine. But a lot of people were a little bit upset about that.
Yeah, I saw that as well. To me, it's a no deal. I would even go as far to say it's a positive that they're working through things,
Yeah.
communicating, and I as long as like there's no hard feelings, there's no offense, which I think both those guys are pretty like business first and can take kind of the like I guess just bluntness of the
Yeah.
conversation. I see no big deal about it, and I honestly I like that there's learning, that there's teaching. Maxi, as great as he is like as impactful as he's been already, he still has a ton to learn. So it's cool that's Harden's like trying to teach to him, trying to work with him, and that's the only way that this things are going to get better is if everybody continues to communicate and talk about what they expect and what they want. So I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Yeah, totally agreed. Another thing, like Harden took over the huddle at one point. There's actually funny. Someone made a joke about Harden taking Doc's job because he started to walk over, and Harden had already had all five of the starters in a huddle and was like telling them stuff. He looks like he's really taking the role as a leader and a vocal leader, and I think we saw a lot, especially in the Cavs game, especially early, a lot of great communication,
Hmm.
and that's where they're going to grow as a team. What I was going to say, what I was going to ask, is have you given any thought to? I'm not saying that this is the correct thing to do or what I would want to do, but have you given any thought to switching up the starting lineup at all?
Yeah, I just don't know what you do. Like Danny Green is a guy you can throw in there, but I don't love that either. I'll say I like the aspect of Matisse coming off the bench. I think is the most appealing part to me. And I've seen the whispers of like Maxi as a 6-man kind of conversation. I don't love that. I mean, I get the idea behind like him being a spark. There's obviously like no scoring on the bench right now, but at the end of the day, like you have to play your best players, and I
Yeah.
I think you're leaving yourself short by like I don't think the staggering would make as enough of an impact that it's worth it in my mind. I'm more on board with benching Matisse for either Niang. I wouldn't mind giving Niang a chance with the starters right off the rip, and I just like having Matisse as like a off the bench like game changing throw in kind of impact player, because while it's very different than a traditional bench player because he's the defensive emphasis and we've called him a reverse 6-man a ton of times. I just like the aspect of like if a guy's getting it going, you can just be like, all right, Matisse, go chase him around for a couple minutes kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've also Matisse needs to chill on the fouls big time too. Is that's always
Jumping.
been yeah, jump shooters especially. That's always kind of been the story with him. But of late, there's a lot of heavy hand checks and hacks that just like you just can't be racking up fouls like that because if there it's very unique on it's a very game to game for how much the Sixers will need him to play, but on the games where they need him for 35 plus minutes, like that just can't happen.
But it's just, I feel like it's discipline. He does a very good job. And I don't. It seems like he's never content with contesting.
Right, he's
He
always got to
wants
do.
the block or he
Mhm.
wants the steal. Sometimes it's okay to just make life hard for that offensive player. Um, ju- this team jumps too much, just
Yeah,
too all together. All of them jump on pump fakes so much. I mean, maybe it was a game to game basis, but Wednesday night against the Cavs, it was all they did, man. I was jumping off my seat. Stop jumping, stop jumping,
yeah,
stop jumping. Like, especially in the paint. Joel does it too. Like, you're 7 foot. Your hand's basically at the rim already when you
mhm,
got both of your hands up. Like, just make it difficult. If he makes it, he makes it. You move on. It's better than fouling him and giving him an and one. But yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people, not a lot of people. I've seen a few things about moving Maxi to the bench, and I get it. I guess he definitely doesn't deserve to go to the bench in terms of his play. And it's not like he would be getting benched. It would just be like
switching the minutes.
moving his production to, yeah, like just staggering the minutes a little bit, which I get, but with the way that they're doing it right now, I don't think it would change that much. But I don't know if it's I like if you wanted to throw Niang in or if you want to throw Danny Green in, just to space the floor. I don't know.
Yeah,
But again, it's something that they can play with a lot, something they can figure out. going forward. But I don't think Doc's going to change that much. And I think Matisse is good to kind of like there's a balancing effect with Matisse. He brings a really good defensive aspect to that starting lineup, which they don't necessarily have if he's not in the lineup.
Mhm.
To move off of this a little bit, Joel Embiid appeared on Draymond Green's podcast, which let me talk about Draymond really quick. A guy that I think a lot of people used to hate, and I definitely used to hate especially during their success, their stretch of time where they were really successful. One
Mhm.
of my favorite voices in sports right now. I think he does a really great job of. I mean, obviously, he's never been afraid to speak his mind.
Yeah.
He's very honest, but I think he's very real. And I think that when he starts transitioning into really being an analyst and being involved full time in the media, which he's going to do, I think it's going to be really great for the game because it's no bullshit. Him and JJ Redick both, they should have a show. They should be the only people talking. Like they're really actually analyzing the game, giving great information, and being real. And like I thought that was a great example with Embiid during this pod. So what'd you take away from that episode?
Yeah, and Draymond, incredibly high IQ basketball
Yes.
mind and has been throughout his entire career as well. My biggest takeaway, I mean, we kind of talked about this right before the show, but it's very cool to just see Joel Embiid just in the setting where he's more relaxed. Kind of any interactions that like I've had or that we ever see with him is he's so like buttoned up and media friendly and has his answers. And Embiid is such an intelligent guy that it always impresses me coming away from interviews with him, just how smart he is as a human
Yeah.
being, both basketball wise and just outside of that. And it was very cool to see him relax, him and Draymond just kind of chopping it up. I would also be pro Draymond Green and Joel Embiid show, which they kind of played with in the interview as well. It's so cool to me. I guess we don't see the like universal respect that Embiid gets all the time amongst like the players specifically. Like there was a moment in there where Draymond mentioned like as much as we talk about like everybody being stars, there really is a limited amount. He put the number at 10 and mentioned Joel specifically in that conversation in that list. And this is coming from the guy who's plays with Steph Curry, has played with Kevin Durant, is up there with like the best of the best in terms of the company he's played with, players he's played against, guards on defense. It was cool to see them talk shit with each other a little bit too. I really did enjoy watching that, and I agree with everything you said about Draymond as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I listened to the second half of it this morning, and like you said, impressed by just Joel Embiid's his recall, talking
Yeah,
about certain events, talking about things. He clearly remembers shit, and it definitely holds well in his head. I mean, it always impresses me, and takes me back when he talks about his journey to the NBA and the things that he went through, and the ups and downs, especially early on in his career. He's so goddamn funny. I
yeah.
don't even think it's intentional most of the time, but he was talking about like the NBA 75. They were both talking about it, and he was like, "I see these guys dribble with one hand, and they're telling me they're better than me." He's like, "No way," which is funny,
Mhm.
hilarious. But yeah, I mean, talking about the way that him and Drew Hanlon attacked uh, you know, improving his game and expanding his game, saying, obviously I took a lot from Hakeem Olajuwon, but once I started struggling in the playoffs, I realized I had to be different. So I
Yeah,
started watching Kobe and KD and Michael Jordan and all these guys. Like I had to start adding. And he also like just gave Hanlon a ton of credit. He was like, he said we the
which is
entire
awesome.
time, which is like it just speaks to who he is. I think just as a person to give so much credit to someone that's not playing, like someone who's not him. Obviously he's been training with Hanlon for a while now. But yeah, I thought it was great. It's always nice to hear Embiid, just like take the guard off
Yeah,
and talk about the game and talk about wanting to be the MVP and wanting to win Defensive Player of the Year and both of them kind of giving each other the flowers that they both deserve. Because again, Draymond's like a very hated player, and as much
mhm.
as I understand why people don't like him, I think once you get into it, I think Draymond is, I think he's a very, very important voice in the NBA, and I hope that people realize that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I also am not really sure what the temperature is on Embiid's kind of, I guess, national like well likeness or how much like I can't
Yeah.
tell the scale on like nationally how many people because there's obviously the free throw critiques and the flopping critiques, which I understand and we watch, but they're like I just can't quite get a sense on what the national take on him as far as like if he's liked or not as a player, which I could see both ways.
I really unfortunately don't think that people like him very much, and
Yeah,
I think it's more based on his reputation than it is who
him.
he is. I think like the crying meme,
Yeah,
the bullshit he used to do. They talked about like the way that he used to be on
Twitter.
Twitter and Instagram and everything. I think that kind of stuff. Which again, I used to say like I used to be like, yeah, if Embiid played for the Celtics, I'd hate his guts. I mean, to be fair, I hate everyone on the Celtics, so it's one thing. But like, I don't know. I understand people not liking him. He's a controversial player.
Mhm.
Not even not even really anymore because of himself, just because of his reputation. But again, I think it's impossible to deny,
Yeah,
his capabilities on the court. Which that's what Draymond was saying. Like it was just really nice to see both of them like pass off respect to each other, especially from Draymond, because again, he's not gonna bullshit. So
definitely. And another cool like I know we kind of try to appreciate Embiid a lot and are a little over the top with it already, but
yeah,
I just would like to say like when them putting it into perspective, like his journey to the NBA, and even when he first got, I also love how much all the flowers he gave to Sam Hinkie and the shout out,
yeah,
the cool behind the scenes, how people were telling him not to go by the process and stuff, and he's like, I don't care, I
yeah,
that man trusted me, had faith in me, so very cool to see that still live
yeah,
on. And then when he's talking about the 3 years he was out, he played 31 games in his first 3 years in the NBA, nothing his first two. And it's just like, think about how often like that guy, the big man, like think about how wrong this could have gone, or just in how likely it is that he's not in the MVP caliber or in the top, pretty much absolutely maximizing on his potential. That just doesn't happen that often. Like there's
no,
so many times where things go wrong, where the injuries catch up, where there isn't the development. Because at the end of the day, like while Embiid was very impactful at Kansas, he is a completely different player than he was in college. And the draft pick itself was an investment on like a, I believe that he can get there and that like he has this
yeah.
potential. And the fact that he's reaching it and we're seeing it is just so crazy and so awesome, because it really is like there it was far from a guarantee that it would be that way.
Yeah, man, and from the way that they were talking, I don't think he sees an end soon. I think he plans on playing for a while. He was talking about how he wants multiple MVPs and multiple Defensive Player of the Year and multiple championships. So, I hope again. And they were also talking about how last year he missed 20 games and didn't win the MVP, basically because he didn't play enough games. And Draymond was like, most guys don't play more than 70 games anyway, so you missed like 8 more than the average. He's like, I don't know how they didn't give it to you last year. Um, but they were just talking about how it's more of his reputation of an injury prone player.
Right.
He's like, I haven't been injured in 3 years. Like, actually missed a lot of games because of injury in like 3 years.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's something that we've all been concerned about, and rightfully so concerned about. But also it seems like part of the past, and as he's worked on his body and done the required work to get there, it's been obviously it's helped him a lot, and he's enjoying the fruits of that labor as we speak. So, to move forward here, we're gonna wrap it up a little early, but we got to go through this final part of the schedule. The Sixers have 14 games, including tonight against the Mavericks. They're currently third in the East. It's going to come down to the wire. There's not a lot of space between these top couple seeds here. What
And
is your prediction for the season or the rest of the
yeah,
season?
and a couple very like important games in terms of
Yeah,
seeding come up. They play the Heat on March 21st. Then they head out west. They have the trip with Lakers, Clippers, Suns, which isn't an easy trip. Then back home to play the Bucks, which that one will be a very big game in terms of seeding. And
yeah,
then the Cavs again, the Raptors twice. Like these are all games that are gonna matter in the scheme of things. I know there's like the rep of the Sixers are dodging the Nets by trying to stay out of the 1 and 2 seed. I don't think that's the case, but what I will say is it's much more important to make sure that they're on the same page, well rested heading in the postseason. I absolutely want to toss up a couple of these games. You can call it like chalking it up as a loss, but you have to make sure Embiid is rested. And I get like the Embiid wants to play every single game. And I think a lot of that is because of kind of what we just talked about, how him kind of just breaking the narrative of him being an injury prone or having to rest or all that. Like if you take away the stretch where he had COVID, he'd be on pace for nearly like upper 70s of games this year, which is
yeah,
pretty absurd. And I mean, you just have to. You can see the legs look a little more tired than they did earlier on in the year with him specifically. They have a couple more. They have two more back to backs, which is also brutal. I would rest him on one out of the two in both of those. I think that's where my mindset's at. I guess in some respect, I don't care that much how these games go. And not that I don't care. I obviously want the best, but the priority needs to be on making sure we're rested and ready for playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at those games, he should take off against one of those teams in the West. He
Yeah.
should, like you said in the back to backs. It's definitely more important, especially for him, because he's so effective even when it looks like he's working a little bit slower, or not like feeling as spry. But there's a clear difference when he comes in energized and feels fresh. And I think having that to start the playoffs would just be such a boost. Like, instead of trying to get there in between series, or you know what I mean. So I agree with you. I think Embiid's health and his, I don't want to say like preparedness going into the playoffs, but just like his physical well-being is definitely the most important. And like we said, James Harden needs these days as well. He's already rested a couple times, so he's going to be important as well. You got guys like Maxey who can play a ton of minutes. Harris has proved he can play a ton of minutes. And
Hmm.
again, I think if you let if you let Embiid rest, you could see what Bassey looks like with Harden, because you have no other option. You know what I mean? I think that could be a good excuse for them to do something like that, or play somebody else. So I don't know. Like you said, I think it's important. It looks like have you seen anything yet for tonight?
He's listed as questionable, but same
Yeah, I
tags as
saw that.
Wednesday. So I would think he suits up today. The next back to back is Sunday, Monday. So they'll play tonight, rest tomorrow, and then Sunday, Monday against the Raptors and the Heat. You got to sit him one of those two, I think, for sure. Uh, and Harden as well. There's still the hamstring concerns. I mean, last year, looking back at last year's playoffs, he literally went through that first Nets series with one hamstring and like could
Yeah,
barely even run out there and was playing. And
yeah,
we saw him. He took the one game off for like the planned maintenance. I think there's probably going to be a couple more of those coming up as well. And it sucks that that's kind of like how the NBA goes, but that's how the NBA goes, and the Sixers must do
yeah.
the same thing. So, yeah, I think that's the priority. It's a very difficult balance right now they have between Harden and Embiid like needing to play more together so they can continue to like learn how to play together and still like needing to rest them. So it's not the easiest thing right now, but they got to figure out how to do both.
Yeah, I also wouldn't mind though, like with the way that Harden, it just seems like he's kind of not hesitant, but I mean, playmaking has become obviously his main priority, which is a good thing. Right? He's averaging over 10 assists a game, and he could be more if guys would stop missing shots. But um, like I think a night or two without Embiid on the floor and letting Harden,
Be the guy.
okay, you got to score tonight. It would be nice to see him take 20 shots. Like I don't care, go get yours. Because again, he has it in him, and it would be nice for him to kind of find that rhythm again.
Mhm.
So as much as it would suck for Embiid to miss games, there's silver linings. And it's, sometimes they're necessary. If Harden can play a night, get back in a rhythm, feel it out. Like the jumpers just look short, things
Yeah.
just look off. It looks like when he misses, the confidence goes away, which I'm sure it doesn't. He's been doing this for a decade plus, so like obviously he's confident in his ability, but it would be nice to see him, lead offensively as a scorer, a night or two going into the playoffs, so we know that's there. He feels that again. So I think there could be some good things to come out of this. But aside from that, you have anything else?
Yeah, no, we'll touch on it more next time, but there's got to be some sort of mid-range game out of Harden too. That's absolutely killing me.
True, true.
But
Yeah, so
yeah,
that can be a good discussion looking into next week. So the Sixers will miss. We'll talk about tonight, Sunday, and Monday going into Tuesday next time we pod. So make sure stay tuned for that. You can check out Sean's Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. Follow me at JSBrain17. Follow the pod at PickSwapPod. Check out the YouTube. Get the podcast wherever you get yours, whether it's iTunes or Spotify. Make sure you check out BetUS, and we'll talk to you guys next week.